Hey, welcome back to Who's Who of the Bible. This is a mini series meant to be a gift to you from the staff of Ignite the Ville. We as a ministry are passionate about seeing students take their next step or their first step with Jesus. And my college life, my college walk with Jesus was so greatly influenced by coming to understand who he was as revealed through his word. So I don't know if we have any puzzle people out there, but maybe we have a few. And so, y'all puzzle people, maybe we can learn something about how to read the Bible from doing a puzzle. The last time I did a puzzle, I was at my friend's grandma's house while watching Say Yes to the Dress, and we had this puzzle out. And with this puzzle, we started working from the corners in, from the areas of clarity to the areas of less clarity. And I think that gives us a great framework for reading the Bible. And so today we're gonna add another corner to our puzzle when we look at the life of Noah. So when I say Noah, what do you think? We're gonna play a little game of word association. Word association is a sociological practice where you say the first word that comes to mind with a set word. And so when I say Noah, what do you think? What do you think? You say Noah's Ark, Noah flood. Maybe that's what you say. And I think we so often think Noah's Ark, and when we think about the Ark, but we don't actually think about Noah. We rarely ever actually spend time thinking about what can we learn from Noah. We're more concerned about what can we learn from the flood. What can we learn from taking animals 2 by 2? And we get caught up in the story, but we don't actually get caught up in his life. And so today I want to look at Noah's life. What can we learn? Have you ever been tragically caught off guard? Caught off guard so much that you're like, oh shoot, wow, things are bad. I didn't realize they were that bad. Maybe that when we're living in this social media age and we're living in just a time period in which public tragedies are more and more common and more able to just be seen. We're like, wow, I didn't realize how bad this or that issue was. And we start tuning in and we start looking at that. And God's calling us to action on those topics. For Noah, that's where Noah steps in. These times where we're having issues, it's not necessarily a unique time, but Noah was running into a unique problem. And the Bible tells us about Noah's cultural context. In Noah's cultural context, he's living in this area of the world where it's corrupt. And our actions might be corrupt, but for God tells us that in Genesis, that it wasn't just the actions of the people that were corrupt, but it was their hearts. And it wasn't just like a one-time thing, but he says their hearts were filled with evil continually. And in Genesis 5:28, that's where we meet Noah. And in Genesis 5:28, we run into Noah's father, Lamech. And Lamech's super excited about having a son. And so he's doing what might have been commonplace in this time. He's saying, my son, he's going to be the one who brings relief. He's speaking these words over his son. And Noah's father is saying, Noah's going to be the one who brings relief. And Noah grows up a little bit, and we don't really hear anything about him until we hear about how bad the culture that he was living in was. And in Genesis 6:9, God contrasts the culture that Noah was living in with Noah's actual life. And it says that Noah was blameless amongst his generation, and that he walked with God. And so in this short little setup, we reach this spot in the road where Noah's story begins to change, and our perception of Noah starts to change. So if you remember Lamech, Noah's dad had said he would bring relief. But I don't think Noah's dad realized that the relief Noah was going to bring was far different than what he thought. Noah's dad was hoping for relief from toilsome work. And I don't know about you, and I don't know how toilsome your work is, but yeah, there are days where Maybe you don't want to go to work. Or maybe you want to be working a different job. That's what Noah's dad was wanting his son to relieve him from. But Noah was planning on relieving not his dad from his work, but from the evil works of his heart. And that's where we learn a first lesson from Noah's life, is that often the rescue we receive from God is different than the relief we wanted. Noah's dad was expecting relief from hard work, but God was coming to deliver a people, to rescue a people from every intention of their heart. And so, when we look at the life of Noah, we can learn that God's rescue is different than the relief we want. In the cultural age of injustice before the law, where not everybody's treated equally, an example of this might be we're saying no justice, no peace. We're saying we just want to be equal before the law. We just want justice to truly be just. But what if that's the relief we were asking for, and the rescue God was planning wasn't just to create equality before the law, but equality in our hearts? What if that was God's rescue? So as we consider this first point, I just want us to see that Noah's story changes our story because it sets our eyes a little bit higher. Second, we come to this idea of, man, how on earth did Noah say yes to God in this moment? Noah was being asked to build an ark when everybody else wasn't building arks. It's not like it was commonplace that everybody was preparing their family for this flood. Noah's probably kind of an oddball out here. So how was Noah able to say yes to God in this test of his faith? As we mentioned earlier, that when the only thing we really learn about Noah, his life, is that he was considered to be righteous before God. And he was righteous before God because of his nearness with God. And I think that's the secret of Noah's life that can change our story. Is that if you're asking yourself, man, how do I get there? I want to be like that person in ministry, as a dad, as a mom. That's the person I want to be like. How do I get there? Are you practicing nearness with God now to prepare you for future faithfulness to God? That Noah walked with God is what Genesis 6:9 tells us, is that Noah was present with God. And Noah's nearness with God in that present moment is what prepared him for that future moment. So be near to God in this present moment. When you're like, man, I want something more. Are you being faithful in the present moment that God has you in? Because your present faithfulness is going to predict your future faithfulness. It's going to prepare you for being faithful to God in the future by being near to God in the present. So lastly, we come to a third lesson from Noah's life. The rescue that we come to from God, that we receive from God, is by trusting in God's remedy. Noah was preparing for a flood, and God gave him an ark. God rescues us through his remedies. And often I think we're looking for different solutions to the problems in our culture and in our life. But the truth is that Noah's life shows us that our stories can be changed by trusting in God's remedy. For Noah, that was an ark. He had to build the ark. For other characters in the Old Testament, that was trusting in the law, but being obedient to it through sacrifice. But as the story of salvation unravels, a man, Jesus, steps in. And we're going to talk about him later, but he totally changes how we relate to God. He totally changes how our sin problem is remedied. How the corruption of the earth that was overcome through the ark with Noah will now be overcome by trusting in Jesus. And so I just want to remind us that as we think about the life of Noah and how his story changes our story, is that our stories are changed in three parts. Trusting God's rescue to be better than the relief that we want. Practicing a nearness with God in the present in preparation for the future. and trusting that God's remedy is good for our rescue.